Hello everybody, in today's video I want to talk about dementia patients and do they have a heightened or increased ability to communicate with their deceased loved ones, or are they just hallucinating? So the evidence I'm going to give you today is going to be almost entirely anecdotal evidence, and it's going to be based on my own experiences with my mother, who is a dementia patient in a memory care facility right now, and some of the friends of mine, because there's not a lot of scientific evidence saying that dementia patients or end-of-life patients have a heightened ability to communicate with the dead. But I do believe it's an interesting topic, and I'd like to share my ideas with you, and I would love you to comment on the video if you have any examples that you would like to share. My name is Dawn Dickinson, and the channel is Living Your Best Life Over 55. And before I begin, I want to let you know that I am going to be a little bit biased on this topic, because I do believe that people have the ability to communicate with their lost loved ones after they pass over, and some people have a better ability than others. Sometimes it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I also think there are people that have a talent that are able to communicate with deceased spirits many times. And I want you to know that I am biased. I did once write a book on this topic about 10-12 years ago. If you would like to see a link to that, I will put on an Amazon link in the description below. But I'm a little bit biased because I do believe that people have the ability, and that not everybody can do it all the time, but there are occasions that we may have spirit visits from our loved ones to get messages when they deem that it is necessary, or just when the situation is just perfectly aligned. So what made me think about this video is that yesterday I went to see my mother in a memory care facility. My mother has had the dementia for about 5 years. She has both Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. And the day before, my sister went to visit her, and so I visited her the next day. And while I was there visiting my mother, I asked, "Oh, have you seen my sister lately?" And she says, "Oh no, I haven't seen her in a while." And yet I know she had seen her the next day. But so that's just to put in perspective the memory issue, that she forgets seeing my sister, but yet she's been telling my sister that her mother has been hanging around with her and visiting her and helping her set up the refrigerator and do some other things. Now, what's interesting is she has been talking about my grandmother, her mother, for a long time, coming in to visit her, and my grandmother died in 1995, so my grandmother has been gone for a long time. But it makes a little sense about her possibly either hallucinating or communicating with my grandmother, because my grandmother was a very loving person, and after my grandmother did die, my mother had a couple experiences with her on the other side doing a visit to say goodbye. Now, what's different though, what's happening now that is different, is that the last few times I've been to see my mother, she's asked, "Where's my dad? You know, I haven't seen your dad in a while. Where is he? Why isn't he coming to see me?" And it's like, you know, my father's been gone for 20 years, so the first couple of times it was very disturbing, because I'd have to say, you know, Dad's dead, and, you know, then everybody'd start crying and I'd be reliving his death, and it was horrible. And she has been doing this with all of, you know, her children recently. My sister, my brother. She's like, "Where's Dad? Why haven't you," you know, and very disturbing to us, thinking that she has forgotten the most traumatic incident that happened in our entire lifetimes. But we've kind of gotten to the point where we're able to deal with that. But what's happening, oh, hang on a second. Okay. All right, sometimes the bird gets loose and wants to pull the keys off the remote control. So I had to get the bird away from my remote control, or I'd never be able to use it again. Okay, so what has been differently, now I'm back to my story. What's happened that's been different is when I saw her yesterday, she was talking about my dad again, but in this conversation she was saying, we were talking about her nice manicure, and she's like, "Oh yeah, your dad was here talking to me about my nails and said, you know, I should cut them, and talked about the manicure." And I'm like, so now she's not asking for my dad, she is having a conversation with him. And of course I wanted to probe this a little further, and so I'm like, "Oh, you've been talking to Dad, you know, what has he been doing lately?" And she's like, "Oh, you know, he's been busy, he's been working on those projects, whatever he works on. It's a little bit different." So she did not say, "Oh, he's busy at his job." she's been talking about, oh, whatever it is he works on the other side. And that is consistent with some of the things I've read in the past about spirits when they cross over to the other side, that they have tasks and jobs to do, roles to play on the other side. So the fact that she wasn't, you know, saying he's in the shop working or he's working on a difficult project, she's talking about, oh, whatever various things that he is doing on the other side, which is making me think that at this point she may be communicating with my father, which is both comforting and terrifying at the same time. And let me tell you what, of course, comforting that my father's spirit would be near and that her mother's spirit would be near, that is very comforting. But the fact that this has been a little bit of a transition from where is your father to, oh, I just saw your father, and then saying things that's consistent with what I've read on books published by other mediums, that people on the other side or spirits on the other side have a role over there and they have things to do over there. That makes it a little bit consistent that she might be communicating with him. So there's a couple of things. I tried to do some research before the video to see if there's any scientific thing that says like a dementia patient might be more prone to hallucination, which we actually know they are, or more prone to be able to communicate with spirits. Of course, that one is very difficult because it's hard to get a study on that, right? It's hard to do a double-blind study on this topic. And the other thing is that the scientific community is not always open to this topic, and they like to debunk it before exploring the possibility. So I did go and do some research, and I've read many books on this topic in the past because I tend to like obsess a little bit. In fact, that's why I don't read about it that much anymore, because I'll go into the rabbit hole and I'll be obsessed about thinking, you know, are the spirits communicating with me? Because, you know, it's difficult after you lose a loved one, and sometimes that's a way to help you deal or process their passing. So I did some research. I couldn't really find anything except for a few books with anecdotal stories, and I'm going to put links to a couple of these books. I've read a lot of these in the past. There is another couple of studies that I noticed that said that dementia patients are more likely to have hallucinations, but they cited that the Lewy body dementia is the most likely to have the hallucinations, and my mother has both the Alzheimer's disease and the vascular dementia, but not the Lewy body, so she is not at that higher risk of hallucinating. And I've noticed she doesn't seem to hallucinate. I mean, she comes up with crazy ideas, like saying that the staff at the memory care facility puts the old men to work, you know, fixing toilets and pulling weeds, that kind of hallucination. But like, she doesn't seem to see things or see people like I've heard other dementia patients talking about. So I thought that was very curious, and what's terrifying about it, of course, is there are many stories in some books and studies and anecdotal videos where people that are close to death now are seeing more visits from their deceased loved ones. And so the other possibility is these spirits are coming to her room more often because she is getting close to death, which is not surprising actually, because the mortality rate of a person diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease is about 10 years, and the prognosis of mortality for a person with the vascular dementia is 5 years. And my mother's had that vascular dementia diagnosis for 5 years, and she is actually physically very frail, and she was considered a hospice patient, and except that she lived past the 12 months, so they kind of unhospiced her. So I'm a little bit concerned that she could be getting close to passing. But then it's odd because sometimes she does better than others. Like yesterday, she knew me, she knew my son, she knew my daughter, but other times she doesn't know me, she doesn't know my sister. The other thing that was weird that she asked yesterday is my son was there, and she goes, "Oh, Alex, do you have red hair?" And it's like, well, yeah, he's always had the red hair. So interesting how that kind of stuff comes up. Now, I could also think of the time when my paternal grandmother passed away in 1993. So at this point, it was very sad because I was off to college. I was living in Flagstaff at Northern Arizona University. So I was not there when my grandmother passed away, but everybody else in my family was. And they said that my grandmother, the last 24 to 48 hours before she passed, was having clear-blown conversations with her deceased parents where she was talking back and forth. And they said what was also odd about that was that she had kind of reverted to a childlike voice. So she was talking and saying, oh, you know, Graham is there, and you know, Pop is there, and oh yeah, she'd be asking him questions and talking back and forth, but she had a voice of what sounded like a 3-year-old. So like, I don't know if she was reverting back there to the time when she was very young or what was going on with that. I personally do believe she was communicating with her deceased parents, but I wasn't there to experience the entire situation when she passed. And the other thing is, my grandmother did not have the dementia. Neither grandmother had the dementia. In fact, nobody in my family has had the dementia. So I know that this particular experience did not have anything to do with the dementia, but it was just that she was close to death. So another example that I find interesting, but yet I've not really found any evidence to support whether these these conversations that they're having with the deceased loved ones has any more likely to occur if the patient is a dementia patient or not, because there's just such a little bit of evidence that's documented. Now, another example I'd like to give you is a very good friend of mine who I've known since we were in high school. Her mother also had the dementia, and just passed about a week ago. So similar to my mother's, except her time from diagnosis to passing was much quicker, maybe 2-3 years. But she recently told me that her mother would say, oh, I asked God if I could speak to my deceased brother or my deceased mother, and he says yes, and he gives me 30 minutes to talk to them, and we talk, and we had a great time. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. And then she, not long after this, passed away. So I'm curious if this could be a dementia thing, or if this could be just a you're getting close to death thing, or could it be a hallucination? Hard to know. I'm curious what you think. If you have any thoughts on this topic, or thoughts of what might be happening with my own mother, I would love to read about them in the comments. I would certainly love to hear your anecdotal stories about this topic, because I find it fascinating. And again, I haven't been reading that much about it recently, because I know my tendency is I'm so fascinated that I will get distracted from my work and spend too much time studying. But again, I love to hear stories about this. So my name is Dawn Dickinson. The channel is Living Your Best Life Over 55. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you would just give me a like, and if you would subscribe to the channel. I post videos every single week designed to help us in our age group, which would be Gen X's and baby boomers, navigate through the golden years and have the best years of our life. I appreciate you watching the video, and I hope to see you back here again next week.